What is the deal with red in baits? There are red baits throughout the gamut of all bass fishing lures that you can imagine. Why are they red? Now, there are a bunch of different theories, a bunch of different ideas, and there's a bunch of different times of year that people say, oh, you gotta have red. Oh, you gotta do this. It's gotta be red, 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 red. And I'm gonna kind of break down my thoughts on that and hopefully break down from a bait standpoint when you're gonna be selecting baits in the red category. Okay, so number one, let's start with the fish itself, Mr. Bass. Mr. Bass has two eyes. They can see different colors and they see differently than we do. In order to see color, I think it's the cones in your eye. Please, in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are rods and cones in your eyes. One of them sees color, one of them sees black and white. And in a bass's eye, from everything that I've read, they can see greens and reds the best out of the color spectrum. So that would make sense to me why red baits can be something very visible to them, to which they can see easily. All right, so let's just get that out of the way. For as far as a bass's eye is concerned, he can see that green and he can see that red really well. So greens and reds, most popular lure colors, kind of makes sense, okay? So now let's go to when do they work at various times and why? First of all, I'm gonna say that the action of the lure, whatever kind of lure it is more important than the color. But when you dial the color in with the action, it's a multiplier. Like, it really makes it exponentially more bites when you get it. So let's start with something fun like some crankbaits. Red crankbaits, I think a lot of people are very aware of. Randy Howell putting that demon colored DT6 on a show at the Classic a number of years ago. Just put on a show that last day with a red colored crankbait. And believe it or not, before then, there was, not everybody was throwing red crankbaits, but it's funny how one tournament kind of turns people's, eyes on what baits they need to be throwing at a certain time of year. That was pre-spawn. That was February. That was, before the water temperature was low 50s. Those fish were just moving up. They wanted that red bait for whatever reason, and they were just killing it. So that was a color. That demon color is kind of, somewhat similar to this Fire Craw, Fat John, one of my favorite springtime colors. I don't know why that red in the springtime seems to be more significant, and you definitely get more bites in the springtime with these red colors on crankbaits. Now you've got your lipless baits. You got the Wamiku shad, which is a very similar color here in this one. I've got the old school rattle trap. They've got Rayburn red, I think, is the most traditional. This is just more of an orange crawfish, but you can see that red and that red orange in those lipless baits is definitely a big deal prior to the spawn. And I think a lot of that is because prior to the spawn, that's when a lot of the crawfish are going to be coming out of hibernation. Crawfish hibernate in the wintertime when the water temperature gets below 50 degrees. But as that water temperature gets up to around that 50-degree mark, those crawfish are going to be coming out. They're going to be crawling around the bottom, clacking around, clicking around the rocks, especially gravelly areas. And so those lipless baits and the crankbaits really come into play. I don't know, I've never been down there to look and swim around, but my guess is a lot of those crawfish have some orange and red in them in the springtime prior to the spawn. So Bass Gorge on the crawfish. I hope that makes sense. I think it does. And even this is way back. There's the old speed trap from Lure Jensen. That was a really good crankbait. And even the newer Speed In from Norman. They got to have this. What is this? Chili Bowl. Chili Bowl. It's one of my favorite names for a red crankbait for sure. And this was something I used in the Bassmaster Classic last year. This is a prototype Spro crankbait, and I colored it red on my own. And this is one of the baits that I used the second day to catch some of the better fish that I caught during that Classic and finished 6th there. So the red crankbaits are something definitely to keep in mind prior to the spawn. And I kind of explained why I think that is. Now, I wanted to show you this because this is a color that I caught a lot of fish on years ago. So this is a Bandit 300. I threw the Bandit 200 a whole lot back in the day, and it's a color called Mistake. And on one side, they had this big red shoulder area, and then on the other side, it was just this bumblebee pattern. And for some reason, when that bait rolls a lot and you get that yellow and red flash, there was something about that red flash, and I'm telling you, I threw that Mistake color a year round. I threw that Mistake color all year, and it produced. So I caught fish on this red one-sided crankbait in the fall, in the winter, in the spring, in the summer, wherever I was fishing, that they would bite a shallow running crankbait a number of years ago. I threw that and had success. So I do know that it definitely can work. But more recently, the fire crawl chatterbait, last spring, these things were hot as a firecracker. You couldn't hardly find them anywhere. I mean, on eBay, they were going for crazy amounts of money, but this is a very bright orange. You can see the similarities here with that orange belly. And I think that's probably kind of the color. They tried to, mirror that demon crawl is what I'm envisioning, and they nailed it, and the fish nailed it in the Bassmaster Classic last year on this particular color with a quiver on the back. On this particular color, the fire crawl, I caught a 6-13 on the final day of the Classic. So it definitely produces in that pre-spawn time period. That's the only time period I saw anybody throwing it last year on tour. Fire crawl may work other times a year, but it may not. I'm not 100% sure, but I just wanted to definitely mention that that jackhammer is one of my favorite absolute chatterbaits. But something else I wanted to mention on the red is, it's been around a long time, is this red kicker blade that people put on spinnerbaits. Now this really came about from the guys in Oklahoma, in a lot of that real dirty water, the Red River. I think that was just a coincidence. The Red River is very dirty most of the time, and that red kicker blade was something guys started experimenting with and catching a lot of fish. So anytime I'm fishing really dirty water, water less than 3 or 4 inches of visibility, I really like this red kicker blade on there, and I've seen it work in the pre-spawn and post-spawn. Just as long as that water's really dirty, something about that red kicker blade spinning around on a spinnerbait that can work real well. So let's get past the spawn and let's get into the summertime. We're not getting away from red just yet. There is something about warm water and worms that bass love red. Now, I don't know how else to explain it. You got these two quiver colors. They're two different tones of red. This cherry blossom and this is redbug candy. Redbug is just an absolute killer in the summertime. I'm talking from Texas to Georgia to Virginia to Oklahoma. I mean, anywhere in the summertime, red is a really, really good color. Red is a great color in the summertime on spotted bass in clear water. It's not just a largemouth thing. It's not just a southern thing. It can definitely work in the upper parts of the country as well. And then, I mean, how could you not forget about Mr. Old School red shad green flake? I've caught fish essentially year round. Now this is not a true red. It's a little more maroonish, but it's red shad. I mean, it's red. It is red, and it's not the black side that, to me, it triggers the bites with this color. It's definitely the red side that triggers that. So that's, again, and it's also a great summertime color in a soft plastic worm. That's the tomahawk worm there. And then I don't want to leave out the D-bomb, but this is El Diablo. It's got a lot of red in it. This is a color that got really hot throughout the whole springtime last year and the year before out in California on the California Delta. Guys were flipping this, having really, really good success with that bright red belly. Crawfish out west, a lot of black and red crawfish out there for some reason. This is a really good color on tidal waters, and I don't know that it's specific to a certain time of year. But don't be afraid to throw something that's a little brighter red than you're probably used to. You're probably used to like a black red flake, watermelon red flake, something a little more toned down red. Don't be afraid to throw that bright color red when you're flipping, especially, like I said, especially Texas, California, and even Florida. Don't miss that. But One other thing I do want to mention is swim baits. Bloody Pro Pearl, this is a Shockwave 4.25. Here at Missile, we've had good success in the summertime, more specifically in the summertime, on this color right here. Of course, white works year-round, you know, pearl white, Fishalicious, any of those, you know, fishy looking colors. But if you want to change it up and give it a little twist on it, it seems more like the soft plastic red worm phenomenon kind of transitions over to the swim baits in the summertime. That's what we've seen here. And so that's something you may want to consider in the summertime when you're selecting swim bait colors. Maybe hitting something with a little red in it in that summertime. Red, summertime, soft plastics. That's kind of the theme here. That's kind of the theme that I hope you take with you. So when you get out there and you think, I need to try something red, hopefully I can give you some of the basics here that will help you select the right color and the right time of year in the bait category that you're fishing.